Today, we're going to be talking about how to build mental stamina so that you don't burn out. It is lovely to see you. Um, you know me, but I'll introduce myself for other people who maybe don't. I'm Charlotte Rooney, and I am a burnout coach and the founder of A Half Managed Mind. And I am being joined today by Andrea Chase, who I am going to let introduce herself, because when I looked at your LinkedIn profile, Andrea, I must admit, I was a little intimidated. So you tell us what you have been doing before we dive into the conversation about mental stamina and how that has served you.
Well, that is so sweet, Charlotte. Thank you so much for that very warm introduction. Definitely nothing to be intimidated about. I could probably say the same about yourself. So I think that happens to the best of us. But I am Andrea Chase. And just the Coles Notes version is I'm an entrepreneur. I have been for the better part of the past 12 years. And I've always kind of had that entrepreneurial gene. But my two companies that I will mention today are Bates Global Incorporated, is a technology and marketing and business analysis consulting firm. It's been in operation outside in the National Capital Region for over 10 years now. And my baby is ProCabby, and I'm the founder of that as well. And ProCabby is really an opportunity for professional chauffeurs to get some skin back in the game and help them rebuild their lost livelihood. So it's quite a journey, and I've definitely learned a lot through these ventures.
Exciting. I'm really excited to dive a little bit more into that journey. But you did also mention that you have moved into the Canadian forest recently. So listeners, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little thumbs up or some kind of reaction from the bottom if you can hear us okay. We may get a little bit of a cut in and out, but I don't think that's something that we can't overcome. So thumbs up or something if you can hear us. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so Andrea, let's start at the sort of basic definition level, I guess. You talked about, when we set this up, you were talking about how you wanted to talk about mental stamina and how that has been useful to you. So what does mental stamina mean to you?
Yeah, so I've become really, really passionate about this piece because I think, number one, I think it's not talked about enough. But number two, I think it's super important to tie it into what we do as business owners. And I'd love to shed more light on that. In essence, I see it as building resilience and confidence to overcome challenges and to be able to persist with difficult tasks over time, i.e., starting and growing a business, right? Definitely not for the faint of heart. But I do really think that anybody can really benefit when they take some time to continuously work on their mental resilience, because I think that at the end of the day, we are always going to be thrown curveballs our way, whether that's in business, personal life, or another career path that you may be in, or maybe in an athletic situation, or if you're in a performing arts kind of domain. But all this to say, I really think it is that resilience and confidence to handle any challenges that are thrown your way and to be able to navigate those without having, a breakdown or experiencing burnout or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, listeners, give us a thumbs up if you have ever had the experience of feeling like, I could use a little bit more strength to get me through this challenging time that I am going through, whether that's because you were running a business, something to do with your employer, or even outside. I know I certainly have had challenging moments in my career where I have needed to, rely a little bit on that internal confidence and strength. Andrew, tell me a little bit more about your journey. So as I say, I mean, you have founded multiple companies now, and entrepreneurship, as you say, is not for the faint of heart. So what brought you to this? How did you know this was what you wanted to do with yourself?
I love that question. And I always love love hearing what people say to respond to that as well. So I think it really started from very young childhood, to be honest with you. Not that I said, oh, I know I want to be a business owner kind of thing, but I've always sort of been that very curious person,
Hmm.
and I've always wanted to try everything, right? So, I've tried my hand at different kind of career paths, or different jobs, even growing up in different industries, whether that was hospitality. I was a dance teacher at one point. I've taught English as a second language. I've worked in sales, communications, a whole array of things, really. But I'm that person that maybe doesn't like to sit still, right?
Hmm.
And the biggest thing that I realized, though, after working for, sort of mom and pop shops and then maybe some bigger organizations, is I have a real passion for seeing something being built from the ground up. And I think that that's one of the key things that we do as business owners and entrepreneurs, is see this seed of an idea grow and flourish into something really exciting. And so for me, I became really interested in that. I think it was probably when I was doing my undergraduate degree in psychology, where I thought I maybe wanted to be a psychologist, but there was this other side of me that kind of came to realize that there's a really key aspect of marketing and business where psychology plays a role. And I thought,
Hmm.
you know what? Maybe I'm going to go explore and see the world, teach English. But there was this pull towards business management and marketing. So I actually did go back to school, and I earned my diploma in small and medium enterprise management, which in essence is basically a really great toolkit to start a business. But like I always say, I think my education, I can't discount, obviously contributed to my path, but I really do think that it is, sorry, my personality and my aspirations for more. Like, I'm not that person that just kind of settles, right? I always want to, level up and explore new opportunities. So I really think it was a little combination of things. And then when I graduated for the second time, I started looking for work. I had in my head, like, I still to this day have one of my big business visions is to run my own hospitality business one day
Hmm.
in the travel space. And that's still on the table, right? But I thought, I want to get my feet wet, get some experience. So let me go and try and work for somebody else. And all that to say, we were coming out of a recession at the time, and it was really, really challenging to actually find gainful employment. So, you do what you do, you piecemeal, you work different jobs. I was working 3 jobs at the time. And then I finally found something that was full time. It was an administrator role, for a program with seniors. I really enjoyed it. And then the funding got cut, and I thought, I'm back to square one again. But then I thought about it a little bit more and said to myself, I really have nothing to lose. Like, I have this idea, I'm waiting for the perfect time, right? I don't
Hmm.
think there's ever a perfect time. I think the perfect time, like I recently said in another talk, is when you have the idea. So I said, you know what, I've got nothing to lose. And in short, that's how our consulting company was born. My partner and I, for lack of a better sense, married our skill sets. His in IT, mine in business management and marketing, and we founded our consulting company. And that really started my entrepreneurial journey, and really taught me about what freelancing is and how to wear all of the hats and everything. So,
Mm.
yeah, that was kind of. I hope that gave you a good little background piece there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you've mentioned several things along the way there that could have been extremely challenging. Having to go back and retrain, deciding that you wanted to, to work 3 jobs at a time when you were coming out of recession, finally ending up setting up something on your own. So when did you really become interested in the idea of resilience and building that muscle for yourself?
That's a great question, Charlotte. I was asked this recently as well. I really think it was right at the beginning of COVID. During that interim, right? Because we're in lockdown, don't really have much to do, right? But
Hmm.
think about what we're doing or not doing. And obviously our industry with ProCabby was super hard hit, like so many industries across the globe were, right? So we can't discount that fact. And I started feeling sort of this pushback towards doing my work.
Hmm.
It sort of started where, because at the time I was living in a condo, so my space was my workout space, it was my relaxation space, it was my workspace, it was my home, and it was all kind of in one. And I had my desk in the middle of the living room, and it was almost like this internal repelling that was happening. It was like I didn't even want to go near my desk. And
Yeah.
I started really thinking about what was going on with me. Like, what is happening here? Like, obviously, there was external factors. We were all under a ton of strain with this pandemic, not knowing what was happening and regulations changing all the time. But it was more than that, right? And so I really started looking internally, and probably didn't hurt, to delve a little bit into that in therapy as well, to be really transparent.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think it was that repelling feeling, and almost a feeling like just so overwhelmed by the smallest tasks, right?
Yeah.
Things that I normally would do really with ease. I started really feeling that I just couldn't handle things. And I wasn't able to produce the same amount of results either. Like, you might be able to get in a normal, quote unquote, regular time, X amount of things done. Whereas during this interim, I'd be lucky if I got one thing done, right?
Yeah.
And then it just sort of tailspinned into feeling guilt, feeling shame around it. Like, why can't I be productive? I'm normally a very motivated person. And I think it even trickled into my health in some respects as well. I was, started having a little bit of a hard time sleeping, having more intestinal problems and things like that. So yeah, it was a lot of these moving parts. And then I started realizing that I was ready to kind of talk about it. And I think it was actually a friend of mine who said, I think you're facing burnout.
Yeah.
And I said, burnout? Why? Why do you think that? She said, well, you're really sounding like you're on the cusp of that. And she herself had gone through a really serious bout of that not that long before that. And she said, I just, as a friend, am trying to look out for you because I'm seeing the signs here. So, yeah, so I kind of tried to sit with it, I guess I would say, for a while. And, it's difficult to be kind to ourselves sometimes, especially when these things are happening with us and we don't really know what's happening. But then I really started putting more thought into how can I work on improving this for myself?
Yeah.
What is it that I can start doing so that I'm not going to feel like this anymore? Because it was this internal battle all the time.
Yeah. I mean, that story resonates so much with me, and I'm sure that several other people listening will feel that as well. That, firstly, that you don't often recognize the signs of burnout in yourself, that it often takes somebody outside of you to point out all of those things that you mentioned. You're feeling repelled by tasks that you would normally, even your desk is repelling you. Things that you would normally find easy are just overwhelming. You're way less effective
That's
than
it.
normal. And then your health and all of these things. And when you look back, you think, how could I not have known that this was more than just a bad day? But at the time, it's often really hard to
Mhm.
recognize. So luckily you had that friend who pointed it
Absolutely.
out to you.
Yes, yeah, no, I'm very grateful for that. But no, I appreciate your expertise too, because I know this is what you specialize in. And I just love that you focus on that, because I think so many entrepreneurs are going through burnout, have gone through burnout, are facing it today, but they just plunge through. And I do think there is, I mean, this conversation, I'm very passionate too about this. It could go on a long time, but in the essence of time, I really do think that a lot of that stems from the hustle culture that we're inundated with on a daily basis.
Yeah.
There's this glorification of hustle, 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 and if you're an entrepreneur and you're not working 18 hours a day, it's like, what are you doing? But
Yeah.
I really want to be able to help change that. And I think that you and I have some very similar goals in that regard. So I'm just really grateful that we connected.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love now to, move into a little bit talking about this So you noticed you were in this space. Your friend was pointing out that you weren't doing really well. You mentioned that you did reach out for some therapy. And I mean, I know that's also what I did at the time. I cannot stress enough to anyone who's listening, who's feeling any of these things, how important it is to talk to people. And whether that is, you know, your friends, your family, your doctor, your therapist, a coach, don't go through it alone. That's really, really important. But if you're not quite at the point where you think I'm actually burnt out already, Andrea, what do you recommend based on what you've learned about building that mental strength, that mental stamina? What do you think people could start doing which could help them? Or what worked for you?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's an awesome question. So there is a list. There's a little bit of a laundry list. I'll try and pick some of the key things, right? And some of this stuff, I'll just preface it by saying some of this stuff we've heard before. So I apologize if I sound like a broken record or you've heard this before and you think, here we go again, personal care routine. But the reality is, it really is so important, right? So I think personal care looks different for everybody. Like myself, I would say I really identify with starting off my day with some kind of movement, right? So
Mm-hmm.
not everybody is that person that wakes up and works out, but I am. For me, it just kind of sets my mind in the right place. But above and beyond that, for personal care, of course, the mindfulness and meditation piece is really crucial, I think, as well as visualizing. So
Mm.
I know that I'm not getting too woo here, but the reality is I think there's a lot of merit to visualizing what your ideal life looks like.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like to you? And how do you want to shape that and build that? Because nobody's going to build that but you, right? So not just very vague imagery, right? Like I always really suggest people write these things down, and it's a living document that might change over time. It should change over time, probably as we evolve, right? But get really detailed about what that means. And I think too, when you see the success that you desire, it's much easier to keep that in mind when things get really tough. Also, that kind of in conjunction with the personal care, I think is really listening to our minds and bodies, right? Like we were saying before, I was kind of not in tune with what was really going on with me. So I think we need to take some time to really look internally. And then things like, getting the adequate sleep, which I know it's hard to tell entrepreneurs to get adequate sleep, but the reality is that you're not going to produce your best results, right? And I think walking away from your computer has a lot of merit, sometimes taking that break.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and do things that fill you with joy, right? Like I always say, no matter what joy means to you, but find that slice of joy in each day, right? Because you're on this really challenging journey, but it's got to be enjoyable too, right? If you're in a constant state of fight or flight or stress, you're really not going to produce great results. Um, get some of those belly laughs in too, right? Like to surround yourself with those people and those things that really bring your soul joy and get you some laughter in your life. Um, Also, we can't discount, I think, the importance of getting out into nature, right?
Yes.
Get out into nature, breathe in some deep breaths, surround yourself with positive people. We talked about the support system. Another kind of interesting thing that I found in my research was the notion of learning new vocabulary or learning a new language. There's something really telling about when you're constantly learning, how that can actually help you grow your business, believe it or not, right? Because in a business environment, especially in entrepreneurship, you're constantly learning, right? But when you kind of take yourself out of the business process and you learn something different, it kind of strengthens those neural pathways to learn in general, right?
Mm.
In addition to that, I think reading is really important. And no, I'm not just talking about, reading professional books or things like that, but read some fiction, read things that you enjoy, that are good for your soul, because
Yes.
they actually are a really great distractor. And I think, having distraction should be welcomed. I think some people feel guilty when they sort of distract themselves, but that actually can be the most perfect exercise for you to be most productive. And this next point might not be for everybody, but I have found personally that when I focus on the toughest tasks in the day first, it usually propels me forward to a productive day. So, you feel like you've accomplished a few things. I'm a big list maker myself. So, that's probably another conversation. But I found a really great tactic for me is, maybe scheduling a list of tasks that I need to accomplish in a given week, but then I break them down day by day. So a lot of times I'll write a mini list the night before, the next day. So I think it's difficult as entrepreneurs sometimes when you're faced with all these things, you might feel like I don't know what to do. I feel so overwhelmed because there's so much to do, right? But if you really break it down and you go into that day knowing, okay, I know these are the things that are ahead of me today, I think it's really helpful. And I do think this last point is super crucial to always remember how far you've come.
Mm.
I think one of the best pieces of business advice I was ever given was to celebrate the wins in our business, no matter how big or small they are, and really to relish in those. And the fact, reflection too, I think can go a really long way when you're building and maintaining mental strength, right? Because then, it helps with the self-confidence piece, and it helps, I think, put all the pieces together. So that's sort of a Coles Notes version, I would say, of some things that have really helped me.
Yeah, and I think that is,
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's got to be able to find something in that list which appeals to them. I'm really keen to open this up so that people who are listening can raise their hands, come on and ask questions or chime into this conversation as well. But before we do that, you mentioned one of my very favorite ways of relaxing, which is reading some good fiction. And by good, I mean terrible. So my personal guilty pleasure
Yeah.
is the historical detective novel slash romance. So what is your guilty pleasure fiction reading that really allows you to de-stress?
I'm wondering if I should be saying this publicly. But you know what? I'll be honest. Like, I am one of those people that loves the celeb gossip. I have to be honest with
Yeah.
you. Like, whether that's just online, I can go down these rabbit hole Instagram accounts, or back in the day, it was like the Us Weekly magazines, and probably in the UK, OK, or whatever you
Hmm.
guys have over there. But that kind of stuff to me just takes me into a whole other realm, and it makes me forget about everything around me for a bit. Right.
Exactly.
So yeah, I will say it's a guilty pleasure, right?
Absolutely. And
So
I
yeah,
I am
that's a
all
good
in
one.
favor of just stepping into those pleasures that are pure, unadulterated pleasure. There's no merit at all, and that is absolutely okay.
Yeah,
So we've got
exactly, and not feel guilty. Yeah.
exactly, yes. So we have got a few minutes left. If anyone who's listening would like to join in, do you have a question that you'd like to ask Andrea? Would you care to share an experience that you've had or a tip that you have which helped you to build mental stamina? You should have a little button at the bottom of your screen which allows you to raise your hand, and then, assuming LinkedIn is collaborating with me, I can bring you on to speak as well. And if not, in the last couple of minutes, Andrea, what would be, if you had to give someone who was feeling like they really wanted to build their mental stamina right now, what would be your top tip to share with them?
I think the top tip, and I did kind of mention this before, is the remembrance of how far you've actually come.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that sometimes we can be so hard on ourselves, especially as we're trying to create something really big. And I'm still dealing with this to this day, right? So, I don't have this all perfected or anything like that. But I think when sometimes we take some time out, and if that means scheduling it in, then do so. But take some time out to appreciate how far you've come. And what I mean by that is, to delve a little further into that, you can create like a love note to yourself kind of thing where you accumulate all of the positive feedback you've been given from clients, from people you've worked with, from colleagues. Like, it's really nice to keep a little folder of these things in your inbox, or even on your phone, create a note of these different things. And I think when you're having a really bad day, I know for myself, it really helps to look to those things to remind me that, there is good in what I'm doing, and that there are people who are benefiting what I'm doing, and that even though I'm not at my final juncture, I am on the way and I've made strides. And it's really important to remember each step is important along the journey.
Yes, very much so. It's so easy to forget where we used to be. And the other one that I always love to think about that is like, if you imagine where you are now, 5 years ago, you could only have dreamt of what you would become today. And even if you're having a bad day, 5 years ago, you would be really impressed. And so I think there's something to do there with the perspective.
I love that. I love what you just said. And if I just go there for a second myself, you're 100% right. I would have never imagined getting to this point, and I think we all need to be a little kinder to ourselves, give ourselves a little pat on the back, right? Because being an entrepreneur, like I said at the beginning, it's not for the faint of heart. It's a super challenging road, but it's super rewarding. But we need to enjoy it along the way, right? And be able to relish in all the stepping stones and the cha-chas forward and back, right? That maybe it's not a perfect path, but it's your path, and own that. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, very much so. I couldn't agree more. Okay, we're coming up to the end here. So just before we close out, I wanted to pick up as well. You mentioned earlier when you said, I don't want to get too woo here, but visualization. And I am with you. I am not a woo person myself, but that exercise of really clearly imagining where you want to go is wildly useful. And it doesn't have to be, doesn't require a vision board. It doesn't require the law of attraction. It doesn't require any of those things. And if anyone is listening and they think, do you know what, I'd like to experiment a little bit with the idea of imagining my future and getting really clear on that, but I definitely don't want any vision boards, pop me a message here on LinkedIn, because I have a recorded visualization guide that you can use. You can stop it, you can do it in writing, or you can just imagine things. And it really, really helped me to get clear on what I'm trying to create and what I'm going towards, which will help you then also with that idea of seeing how far you've come, because you know where you're trying to get to. So if that's something that speaks to you, or you would like to know more about it, please get in touch. And other than that, it only remains to say thank you so much, Andrea, for joining via your tethered mobile in the middle of the forest in Canada. I've really enjoyed speaking with you.
Well, the pleasure's been mine, Charlotte. Thank you so much for welcoming me and having me. And the work you do sounds wonderful. It sounds much needed. And I hope that many, many more people will be able to identify how important these mental stamina pieces are, so that we can avoid burnout. So I just have to say I respect you very much. And thank you so much again for your time and for this wonderful conversation today.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you everyone for coming to listen. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon, evening, whatever your time zone is. And I hope that we will be in touch over the next few days. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Charlotte. Take care.
Bye now.